Hey, hi all, welcome back to the channel again. Today we are going to discuss about Angular forms, and there are actually two types. First one is template driven form and the second one is reactive form. First we will understand what is meant by forms. Forms are actually used to collect input data from users, and they actually enables the interaction between application and the users. So if you take an example of login form, so unless and until you log in into application, you won't able to see the application functionalities. So that's a basic, form we will have in any applications. But then inside application, we'll again have a forms for the profile creation or profile, to maintain a particular user's profile. So this is actually a second example of forms. But then there are multiple use cases inside the application in while using the features of a particular web applications. So we may need to add multiple forms to take inputs from the users. For example, if you look at the Facebook or any other applications like using Google applications as well, so when you try to create your own email address or any other account, you will need to fill the information over there. Or if you ever use the Google Forms as well, so there as well, they are taking inputs from the users. So basically, forms are used to collect data from the user and processing it, and the data will get sent to the backend for processing. Now let's understand the forms in Angular. So Angular forms comes with two-way data binding, and there is a form model which is attached to the form element on the HTML or the view of a component. But then, how to do that, right? So the template driven form example is actually an approach in which we are, able to use the template variables as an instance of that particular form, and then we are passing that instance to the TypeScript methods so that we can use whatever properties and methods or the controls, the HTML controls that form has. And there are multiple states as well the particular form can have, like the pristine stage, invalid stage, valid stage, touched stage, untouched stage. So these kind of states, not stages but states, a particular form contains. So based on those states we can actually add validations as well. So first of all, let's look at an example of template driven forms, and then later on in the upcoming videos we will learn about reactive forms and form validations. Then we have different states of forms and then dynamic forms as well. So how we can inject dynamic forms into a particular component's HTML, right? So let's do an example of template driven form then. Before doing this, you need to understand for the template driven forms you need to import the forms module. So why do we need to import the forms module, right? So inside a template driven form we are going to use the ngModel. ngModel comes under this forms module, and then you will need to import this ngForm directive as well. Okay, so this ngForm directive is used to give the type, okay, to the form or the template variable we are creating on the HTML, and then so whatever properties these properties or attributes or methods this ngForm contains, those will be available for us to use. Okay, So these are some properties or methods it has, like dynamically adding a control, getting a controls, removing controls, add a new form group, remove a particular form group, then we have a get form group, set value we have, dynamically we can set the values. So in this example, we are actually going to use these two methods, on submit and on reset. Then we have a reset form. Okay, so these are actually some of the methods and properties we have, and it actually helps us to manipulate a forms dynamically from the TypeScript file. But we'll not need all of these in the template driven form example. So we'll understand all these functionalities in upcoming videos one by one when we are going to use the reactive forms. Now let's understand the HTML first. So as you have, as we are actually creating a form with only two controls, so let's create a interface for it. Let's export interface, export interface user, and then it will have properties for name as string and then email as string. Now we need to create a model based out of this user interface. So let's create a user model of type user, and then you need to create these two properties actually. So name, initialize the value with empty, then we have email, initialize the value with empty. Now as we have this model with us, so let's create a form now based on that model. Form, then inside that we'll have two divs. In the first div, let's add a label. Let's add a for attribute to it. For, let's say, name, the label would be name. Now let's add an input type text over here. Give it an ID attribute as name and a name attribute as name. Okay, and we are using ngModel. So let's use it, ngModel. Then we need to add it user dot name to it. Okay, now let's end this tag. Now we need to copy this, paste it over here. Let's change the labels, email, then we have ID as a email, name as a email, and over here the model key we are using as a email, and the type of this text will become an email. Okay, so now let's add two buttons. So let's take another div, button. Here we'll need to add a submit button, and then again we'll use another button to reset the form. Now the type of this button will become submit, because on clicking of this button we need to submit the form. Let's add a class to this, class btn primary, and for this we'll need a button of secondary type. Okay, so now let's add a class for this div as well. So let's say class form group, copy this class, paste it on this div as well. And for the input control, we again need to add a class that is nothing but form control class. Okay, copy this, paste it over here for the second input. Now with this all changes, let's look at how our form is looking. So as you can see, this is the form we have. Now we need to add the template variable on the form itself. So how to add a template variable? We need to use the hash user form is equals to ngForm. So this is the directive. We need to assign it to the template variable so that this template variable will have some type. Okay, and it can give us whatever functionality that ngForm gives us. Now let's add a method ngSubmit, and on this method we need to call a method. So let's add a method over here on submit, and over here it will expect some parameter. So parameter is nothing but of type form. So let's say ngForm we are getting, okay, of type ngForm. Again on reset we need to add over here as well the same kind of parameter we need to reset the form. Let's use this method over here, pass the parameter of this user form. So user form template variable of type ngForm itself. Okay, so the same type we have given over here, the ngForm. Let's use this method on reset. On the click of this reset button, let's pass the variable user form to it as well. Okay, so with this all changes, let's console log something over here. Console.log, let's say ngForm.form.controls controls off. Okay, so now we need to use the key. Okay, so what type of control or which control we need to access? Then we need to give the value of name attribute of that particular input. So let's give it value and then the value property of it. Let's paste and use it for the email. So I'm taking the value of name property. Okay, so that's the reason whenever you create a form in the Angular, you need to have this name attribute, or the name attribute should be always available on every form control. So let's copy this email and paste it over here, and over here we'll just reset the form ngForm.reset. Right, so this is how we have created a simple example of form. So as you can see on the UI, let me save everything. I have saved everything. So let's add LearnLift text over here and then email test@test.com. If I click on submit now, it will give us the values of those controls. As you can see, we have a values of those controls over here, and if I click on the reset, it sets the value or change the value as null from the old value. Okay, so now what we want is we want to have the submit button to be disabled when the form is invalid. So let's say that we will use the same variable copied, then this is the attribute binding we are using, disabled. Invalid key is available on this form, the template variable, which is type of ngForm. So let me save this. Okay, it says this form is actually ng valid, so that's the reason it is not. Okay, so what we can do, we actually have to add the required attribute over here, so that at first whenever the form loads or we reset the form, it should become the invalid. Okay, now because we are adding the required attribute, it says that Angular actually treats every control as an invalid control at the time of fresh load or at the time of reset. So let's save everything now. As you can see, disabled attribute has been added to this button. This is the disabled attribute because now the class for this form has been changed. That is nothing but ngInvalid. Okay, because we have added a required attribute over there. Now when I change some value over here, so now the button has become enabled. Okay, so I can click that button now. So when I click that button, as you can see, the ngSubmitted has been added and then ngValid also has been added. So if I see the console, you can see these values are there, and then once I click reset, you can see the button also has grayed out and the disabled attribute again added to that button. And as you can see, ngInvalid class is also added to the form. So this is how the simple form is, and you can create the forms based on or using the template variables as well, as you can see over here. And for that you need to use the ngForm and forms model. Okay, so these two things are actually essential. So this is how it is a template driven forms approach, and you can make use of a template variable to access whatever states it has and for validations as well. And we later on, like in the validations video, we are going to learn how we can make use of the form states, and based out of that how we can change the classes of input controls as well. So for this video, this is it. I hope you have liked it, and if you like it, so you can hit like and share this video with your friends, and do not forget to subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon. Thanks all guys, let's meet in next video.